Welcome back to You and Your Taxes. I'm Rohit Vyas again, and my guest again is Neil Shah, Wills and Estates attorney. We're talking about the estate planning process, the wills and estates planning process, if you will. All right, Neil, let's talk about what is the age at which a person should typically begin to think about estate planning and wills. And now, the reason I ask you that is because income starts have changed.
Correct.
With a lot of the IT folks, for instance, coming into the country, they start at higher salaries. So does it behoove them then to begin planning at an earlier age rather than guys like us who worked through the whole system for years before we got to a certain salary level, say, in our careers and our lives?
It's a great question. Yeah. Would it surprise you if I told you that it had zero to do with your assets? There are people who have very little in assets, but they have young children, or they have parents that they take care of, or they have grandchildren that they take care of. So this estate planning process, although we definitely associate it financially, it has a substantial amount to do with the actual assets itself, but it has more to do with whether or not you have somebody you care about after you pass away. So people in their 20s who are just starting a family, my wife and I started our family when we were in our late 20s. So if we were in our late 20s, maybe we didn't have as much financially, but we had to make sure that a guardian was appointed for my kids.
Just in case something happened.
Just in case something were to happen. The estate plan is your place to appoint that guardian. Let's just say that that young couple has a couple of $100,000. Sure, there's going to be no tax consequences, but you want to make sure that couple of $100,000 makes its way to the minor children in the right, proper way. So here you have a case where there's not substantial assets, but there's a very strong motivation to make sure you've done the planning. So my take on this is when there's either substantial assets, because that does make a difference, or when there's somebody that you care about, whether it's a spouse or whether it's children, I think it's important to start engaging in this sort of planning. As you get older, it just becomes that much more important, and your planning might change, it might become more complex, but either way, the planning becomes very important.
So now, talking about the planning changing and becoming more complex, that's a good point you raised. And so my question to you is, how complicated is it to incorporate those changes in any kind of will that's prepared for these purposes?
It really depends on the complexity of the plan. There are going to be simpler wills, simpler trusts, which are fairly straightforward to change. It used to be back in the day, say 25, 30 years ago, before word processing became an everyday thing, where somebody would have to actually pull out the whole typewriter and actually carbon copy the wills and everything like that. Making modifications, making changes were much more difficult. But when we're talking about things like revocable trusts or wills or powers of attorney or healthcare documents, those are fairly easy to modify. So my recommendation is for anybody who's got a plan already in place, once a year, and I usually recommend around daylight savings times, you want to actually open up your documents, or maybe not even open up your documents, but you want to think about your estate plan. And you want to think about what's changed over the course of the past year. Has there been any births, deaths, marriages, divorces? Have there been any employment changes, retirements? Has there been any residency changes? Have there been any legal changes? That's going to be a hard one for most lay people out there to understand, but have there been any legal changes? And if any of those questions are answered yes, then it's probably time to give your advisor, your attorney, a call to say, hey, this is what's happened over the span of the past few years, over the past year. Is there something that I should be considering doing differently with my plan right now?
Now, unfortunately, many people in our community, just like everywhere else, are going through family changes as well. Now, that could be because of debts, that could be because of divorce, a horrible thing to happen, especially in our culture, but it's happening. Now, how concerned should people be once there's a divorce that's occurring in a family, so there's a breakup of the nucleus, basically, unfortunately. How complicated does that become in terms of estate and wills planning?
It's important. It's extremely important. In fact, so important that sometimes divorce judges will actually mandate that certain estate plans be updated or insurances be obtained. So it's crucial. Specifically with the divorce context, an example would be, husband and wife. Right now, they're doing their planning, and the husband will name the wife as the beneficiary, and may also name the wife as the trustee. So when they get divorced, in most states, there are laws that say that a divorce is going to nullify some of those designations. But then you have the backup sticking in. So who's that backup? And if you ask most people, they might not even know who they named as a backup, or worse yet, they might not even have a backup. So it makes it very important, crucial, that at a divorce situation you look at that. But there's other situations too. So I may have named a trustee who's moved to India. or somebody who's older who's passed away or become disabled, or maybe is no longer the right person to act as a trustee or as an executor. So those personal changes, extremely important, and are automatic triggers to start reviewing and maybe even revising the estate plan.
All right, I think we'll take another quick break and then we'll talk about a funding meeting, as you put it. That's a very important part of this. And then the final meeting that takes place. So let's take a quick break, come back after this break. My guest once again is Neil Shah, Wills and Estates attorney. We'll be right back with You and Your Taxes after this short